This is Transparency, a podcast by Gender Dysphoria Alliance, hosted by Aaron Kimberly and Aaron Terrell. Each week we'll be joined by people who have personal or professional experience with gender dysphoria and physical transition. We'll also discuss how our trans experiences relate to the concept of gender identity. Join us for a compassionate yet heterodox approach to the question of trans.
Hello, welcome to Transparency. We've got Kat here as a guest with us. Kat is a member of the Gender Dysphoria Alliance. I met you, I think it was about a month ago, Kat, when we had a Zoom chat, and you had such wonderful things to say. I could tell that you're a fountain of information. So we've really been looking forward to having this chat with you. Is there anything you would like to say, just as a few words of introduction, so that our listeners know a bit about you?
Sure. And just first, I just want to thank you both for inviting me. You two both do a great job of just escalating the discourse, trying to open up people's minds outside of just the normal scope of just that everyday trans zeitgeist discussions that are just very cookie cutter, and I don't feel are very progressive. So I just want to thank you both for inviting me. I appreciate what both of you do. But just a little bit about myself. I'm just a regular person. I don't have an agenda or not with any major organization outside of CDA. Don't have a grift. I'm not looking to get anything out of this. I'm just a regular person who just kind of has some thoughts about just the trans discourse. There's a little bit about me. I identify as a Black American trans woman. I am mixed with, as far as my upbringing, originally from New York City and Queens. Moved to New Jersey when I was about 12 or 13, and I transitioned, at least socially, around 2016, and then 2017 legally, paperwork, driver's license, things of that nature. And I just have a regular job and do regular things, but I'm just an occasional Twitter troll who just not liking the way that the discourse is going and the people that are pushed in front as supposed trans activists or leaders in the trans community that are speaking for us. I'm just not there's a lot of those goings on. That's just a little bit about me. I guess we can go to more specifics, but that's pretty much it.
That's one of the things I first noticed about you on Twitter. I can't remember exactly how you worded it, but it was something to the effect of sort of like, we need a reset button on the trans community, right? That we need to build a healthier trans community.
A reformation.
A reformation, yeah.
Or reformation, depending on where you are. I'll pronounce that differently. I'm not sure what's the correct way per se, but so it's a little bit controversial to relate to this, but a lot of people say that Islam, the religion, needs a reformation, just as Christianity had one. And transgenderism, so to speak, has sort of become a religion of sorts. It's got a lot of religiosity to it, and I guess beliefs that are held by a majority of the group that seem to change depending on whatever the corporate Overton window kind of pushes it towards every year or two, which is a different story entirely. But I just really feel like it needs a reset, but more so just a reforming of what it means to be trans, and not in a gatekeeping sense to keep people out. It's more so to solidify what does transitioning mean, why it should be happening and why it shouldn't be happening for some people. And kids involved and parents involved and ideology. And there's a lot to it. I don't know where to start. I don't know where to finish. I don't know the beginning, end, middle. I don't know. I just know something needs to happen because I just think we're on a collision course. That's not good. Just to put it bluntly there.
Mm-hmm. What is your fear? Like if we continue along this path that we're on, what is your sort of fear or objection to the to the to where we're headed?
Well, we're getting to a stage where there's a couple of aspects to it. We've got the whole corporate, you know, uh, I'll jokingly call the LGBT alphabet community the lollipop guild, the sorts, the all-knowing group of people who just change their perspectives depending on the way the sun shines on one particular day, and everyone just needs to follow whatever the discourse is and the right words to say and things of that nature. And it's not really based on anything legitimate other than a higher education slash corporate marriage of consensus and parents and children, educators, and um, those within corporate America and corporate North America at large. And the West overall, all of us need to follow in line with whatever is being said and whatever is being pushed. And anything outside of that is anti-trans. Even if you are trans, you're a quote unquote anti-trans person, or a self-hating trans person, prohibiting progress in some way. Um, um, that's just the general scope of where I see this going, but there's specific aspects of parenting and children involved and how young children are transitioning and just the idea of just children just you know they people don't want to admit this, but it seems that children are having the idea that it's not just being an ally is good enough to trans people and to LGBT people at large. Being trans is now is almost akin to you are now exalted. You are now absolved of anything that you could possibly do wrong, just based on the fact of the whole victimization hierarchy of I've acquired as much victimization points as possible. I am absolved of any wrongdoing and I am celebrated for just simply being a person that's trans, just existing. Existing gets you praise now. There's no merit to what you do or your accomplishments or what you produce or what you don't produce. And, it just, and that's, not why I transitioned. And I don't want fake praise. I want, my merits of my work to be uh, shown and judged on the merits of my work.
Mm-hmm.
Not because I'm Black or because I'm trans or because I'm Black and trans. Mm-hmm. None of that. But that's me personally, that I'm seeing a shift, especially within children, which is so dangerous, of that mindset infecting the youth. And I don't think that's a good way to go.
It's quite different from social movements in the past, isn't it? Like when I think about, the fight for civil liberties in, like the 60s, for example, it was about character, right? I mean, that was what Martin Luther King Jr. was talking about, right? Was that I want to be judged by my character as an individual, not by the color of my skin, right? That was very much in his language and his movement, that I don't want my transness in this case to be the thing that people see and judge me by, and not see my individual merit and my individual character. So that flavor of activism seems to have really changed, where now the emphasis is very much on a racial group or trans group or gay lesbian group, that it's all about groups, not about an individual character. Would you agree with that shift?
Yeah, that's it's so crazy. That's pretty much dead. That's gone. That mentality is probably seen as hate speech, as anyone else said. I want to judge you on the content of your character, not of what you look like or what tribe you belong to. If anyone said that now in a large forum, they would just be, it's around, liberals and supposed to tolerant people. They would be upset with that. They would feel, oh no, we need to uplift all of these tribes, all these tribes that have been marginalized for so many years. We need to uplift them so everything is equitable. We need to make sure that, we bring all these people up. So, to the level of, I guess, the cis white person. I guess that's the aspiration point of the highest order in terms of, oh, they most likely have, acquired their wealth in through some form of slave trade or some type of stolen riches or something, which, isn't true. The everyday white person never owned a slave and is broke, just statistically speaking, in North America and just the West at large. So I'm sort of bringing race into this, but I think it's important to line up with what I'm bringing up here. It's where we're doing this under the guise of these people, these different groups of people, different minority races, and those who express gender in a different way, and sexual minorities, anyone who's not heterosexual. We're just lumping all these individual sects, and they're even fighting against each other for support and praise. And individually, these people are not being allowed to have their own opinions because they're all under the scope of liberalism, and you must vote for this person, and you must espouse these views wholeheartedly without any dissent. Because if there's any dissent, our group, our tribe will fall apart. And I think that's the mindset here, this group mob mentality at all costs, instead of having an open discourse about all aspects of, more specifically, we're trans folk here, so we're talking about transgenderism, trans people, not having those specific conversations about every aspect of transness is, I just think it's silly, and it kind of infantilizes us, if I can say that word correctly. We're just children, and we're incapable of achieving heights on our own individually. We're always held back by some external force, which is usually blamed on so-called whiteness, the patriarchy of sorts. There's always a reason. There's always something that's blocking us individually from going from point A to point B, so we almost stick together and have no dissent, no issues in between us. So if you speak outside of that, that line, we've got a problem, and you must be excommunicated from that group. So that othering of people is happening currently, and I feel that GDA is kind of like a group of people that are essentially being othered, and we kind of represent a lot of different trans people who want to say the things that we say and have the discussions that we are having, but they feel that if they're part of, they're a person and they've got 5 friends in their group, and there's no consensus, and you're the 6th person out, you're gone. You've lost your friend group, you're gone. So I just don't think it's healthy to have groups and subgroups pitted against each other in that way, where we're basically just beholden to whatever the consensus of, not even just like these groups, consensus of the groups above them who are, people are getting paid as front people for all these groups in that, really black community, all these black politicians, majority of them, and all these trans rights activists who are getting paid boatloads of money for saying certain things and not saying certain things and demonizing certain people for having certain views. So people don't see the 3,000-foot view, and people are just kind of looking at the low level stuff and people squabbling with each other, not seeing people that are controlling the discourse, and all you need to do is basically follow the money. But people are afraid to say that because then the money stops.
So very good points. I hadn't really considered it in that from that angle, but I exactly see what you're saying. It's interesting how the capitalism used to really favor the individual, right? It was always about the individual, and it's kind of a facet of capitalism there. But now it seems to be completely shifted in that everything is about the group, and one has to have a group association in order to kind of have any financial worth, right? Like what you're saying about there's economic value in having these people bundled together in a group identity. But then when you go back to the individual level, is like, if you aren't associated with a larger group that you can put yourself in, you're kind of free floating and alone in this current the kind of the zeitgeist, as you would say, like the social framework where we're operating in. And then going back a little bit too is like with what you're saying about like that the hierarchy of oppressions and having to be able to place yourself somewhere in there. It seems to be, this is something that I've observed for a while, is like trans is the one thing that people can opt into, right? It's within your control. And so I think a lot of people who would just see this, you have to have a subgroup to belong to in order to have any value socially, and then now, as you're saying as well, externally to have any economic value. And so I think trans is the one thing that these kids can put themselves into, to have a social group, to have kind of any sort of social credit, and then also there's now a dollar sign on those individuals to get them, physically into that categorization as well. It's pretty dark and dire. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a really strange phenomenon, isn't it? Like, and it seems to almost be hijacking our need for connection. I mean, we do need to belong to social groups, but this isn't a healthy way to do it. Like this feels like a very oppressive way of developing connection with others, because as soon as you have an opinion, or a culture that's different from someone else's, or a political leaning that's different from someone else's, you're ousted from the group. Like, so trans politics ends up oppressing trans people because I'm not even allowed to think for myself. Right. And would you say that there are parallels in the Black Lives Matter movement where Black Americans feel like they're actually being oppressed by the Black Lives Matter ideology, in the sense that a white person can learn that ideology and tell you you're wrong, you're doing black wrong because you're not following the ideology. So it actually ends up reinforcing racism in a way. I mean, have you experienced that? I mean, I'm imagining that happening just because I'm seeing it happening in the trans rights movement. But would you say that's happening for Black Americans as well?
Oh yeah, 1,000,000%. I'll just tell you a very brief short story of this white trans woman that I had met when we were just discussing things, and I forget how it came up. I just mentioned, "Hey, I'm not really for the whole Black Lives Matter thing," and just the look in her eyes of just like, "What? I don't get like have you seen that meme where it's the woman
Aaron.
and it's like all of the all the equations pop up?"
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's exactly what happened. It's like, but you're black and Black Lives Matter, but and you're trans too. So like I think like Black Lives Matter would like help you out with like stuff, and like I don't get it. So it was just so amazing to me to see the liberal confusion. And I feel for her because she just didn't get it. But this is an example of just like where we're at in the discourse.
It does really simplify things for us, though, doesn't it? It's like you can see the draw because it's like, oh, now I can put these people in these classifications. Everything makes sense. It's easy. Yeah. And then when it's not easy, it's like, oh, shit, wait. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well,
It's just population control on some level. There's a deeper population control. We can go deeper into that. That might be a little bit too deep for this combo, but we'll see where we go. We can talk about just. I'm sure this went around the world. The comment by then presidential candidate Joseph R. Biden when he had an interview with Charlemagne the God, a very famous radio show host in New York City. He did I believe, a Zoom interview with him, and he said something to the effect of, "If you ain't voting for me, you ain't black." Now, we can dissect that a few different ways. We can talk about how the fact that a mid-70s, late 70s white man from Delaware, whose family I am almost certain was involved in the slave trade. Like 99% sure, someone could fact check me on that. Let's go with that. And he's been pictured with Robert Byrd, one of the former Grand Dragons of Ku Klux Klan. He's been on. He's pushed numerous anti-black super predator type crime bills in the late 80s and the early 90s. And just anecdotally, things people have said about the things that he said in private and in public. I'm not going to outright call him a unabashed racist or anything like that. Because people throw that term around and call everyone racist at this stage. It almost has no meaning anymore. But I'm just giving you the scope of what this guy is in just his demographic makeup. Now, the fact that he said that and got away with it is mostly because the liberal folks in the Democratic Party are pushing the fact that, oh, he's going to push things that are going to benefit the black community, which has not occurred and isn't happening. The funding for historically black colleges and universities have been pulled back tremendously from the Trump era. Just an example of things that have been pushed back. Just the economy at large is hemorrhaging, and things are not good. Things are not going to be good for the black community over the next few years, just through most economic projections. But I just want to isolate that comment in the fact that the gall of someone to say that, to question someone's blackness because of who they voted for at the ballot box or their mail-in ballot, or who they support, or anything of that nature. It just symbolizes the polarization, the gaslighting of this one group of people, black people specifically, 13% of the U.S. population on average, to go into one particular direction, and if you don't go in that direction, you are anti-black, you are prohibiting progress in some way, and how dare you not vote for this man who has been running for president since 1988? How dare you not vote for this man who is putting in or accepted the vice presidential candidate place to be candidate Kamala Harris, who was like 10th or 11th place in the primary to become the Democratic presidential nominee. As far as like her polling was horrible. The only reason why she was in that position, in that position now is because of just colorism, just flat and unabashed colorism. She spent most of her life in Canada, apparently. She identifies more with her Indian side than her Jamaican side, as far as from what we hear. And apparently she's just, we can debate that, and other people may say otherwise. She's probably not very qualified for her role. But generally speaking, she's there and was there to hone in on the Black community and go, hey, look, you've got two options. You've got the two white people on this side, both elderly, and on the other side, you've got the elderly white guy who's not doing so well in health, and we've got the relatively younger, we would just, I hate the terms of Black and white and all of these just colloquial terms that we just encapsulate people in with tribalism. Like, okay, where are they from in Africa? Are they, a descendant of slaves from the United States? Are they from the Dominican Republic? Like, we can go deep into who's Black and who's white. Are they from Kazakhstan? Are they from Poland? Are they first generation immigrants? Have they been in the United States since they were, for 20 generations? Are they mixed with Native Americans? All that stuff. Their ancestry can go deep. But what is white? What is Black? At the end of the day, it's colorism. So, just want to preface it with that. We've got the whole colorism aspect of, we've got someone who's just visually Black on the other side. So these are your two choices as an American. And if you go into one direction or another, just through just the low IQ, lack of low information, mainstream media, liberal discourse, if you go into one direction or another, that determines whether or not you are Black enough, you support Black people, you are tolerant, and whether or not you are pro-Black progress or not. And the choice is apparently clear. You needed to go with the side with the person on one side who visually is Black. And those are and that was the only choice you could make if you did vote. So that's how far the discourse has gone, and that's how easy it is to manipulate a group of people. That's what happened to the trans community. Easily. You throw a token trans woman or trans man or someone who says they're who claims identity of non-binary, you throw them in as a political candidate in one particular area, or you throw them on TV and as a grift to support something, and we want money because of this cause, or they're a teacher and we want them. It's a person who's all this tokenism. You put those people in those positions. One, the 99.9% of people who don't identify that way are going to go, well, if I don't agree with what they're saying, I don't want to be transphobic. I don't want to be homophobic. I don't want to be anything phobic. I want to be an ally. So whatever they're saying, I want to trust their experience, and they're right 100% of the time, even though I may disagree with some things. I just don't want to espouse those publicly, those views. And then the 0.01% of the trans, non-binary, LGBT community, we have to go with them because that's the tokenism that's there. That's the pillar. That's the symbol. That's the golden calf, so to speak, to get us from point A to point B in whatever progress we're trying to achieve that week or that month or that year. Mm-hmm. And we can't dissect any about that politician or that corporate spokesperson or that teacher or that whoever this person is. We can't dissect their views on their merits. We just have to go, they're trans, so they're for us, they look like us, they take the same hormones as us, or whatever, just whatever thing to tie into the tribalism. That's what happened. And that's been happening in the Black community for, hundreds of years at this point. I'll tell you another anecdotal, not a story, just a brief comment I made to my grandmother, who's in her mid-70s, and of course she loved Barack Obama, and obviously that was just the pillar of everything to, majority of Black people. It's like, oh, Black person is president, yada, yada, yada. But I said there a couple of weeks ago, I said, hey, look, just because someone on TV, say CNN or MSNBC, like a Don Lemon or a Joy Reid or whoever these people are, look like you, doesn't mean they have their best, doesn't mean they have your best interest in mind. Doesn't mean the big pharma ads that are on all of these 24-hour news channels aren't paying their bills. Doesn't mean that they're not behind the scenes told to say certain things or else they're outed. So keep that in mind when you're watching your magic TV box that's telling you to do things or say things or to believe things. Try to think for yourself. You're in your mid-70s, you should probably step out of the propaganda window right now. And I know that's rich, coming from your 30-year-old trans granddaughter. As far as, it's, I find that's the other thing too. It's like you can't say certain things because you're trans and you're in the propaganda window, so to speak, also. So it's like you can't say certain things, and it's you don't know what you're talking about either, kind of thing. So I get it. Devil's advocate, I understand too, but me saying that to her, she didn't take it well. But clearly, she didn't take it well. But it's just an example of just where we're at in the discourse. We are clinging on to these people who are supposed to represent us in whatever subgroup we belong to, and people are too lazy to do any research on who's paying them, what their background is, and what they really stand for. It's just everything's just fluff. Everything's just, as long as we get the guy out who had a lot of mean tweets, we're okay. The country is saved. Going towards 9 months later, the United States of America clearly sees that the country is not saved as far as the United States goes. Can't speak to Canada. Canada, you guys have your own problems.
we certainly do.
Yeah. So, but we're not far behind, unfortunately, just that part. But that's where we're at, and it's just very sad to me. I don't know how we pull back from it.
It really is insulting, isn't it? That going to what you're saying, like if you don't vote for me, you're not Black. I mean it must be really insulting, because it's basically saying that you're not allowed to think for yourself and to learn what all the candidates have to say and make a choice for yourself, right? This is supposed to be a democratic process where we are able to think and form opinions for ourselves and choose freely whichever candidate we feel aligns with our values. And you're being told, well, your Blackness is called into question if you don't think and act and believe certain things. And there definitely is something like that going on in the trans world, that unless we're sort of aligned with this particular political way of thinking of things, it must be that well, to your point of that reaction that you got when you said you didn't support the Black Lives Matter movement, I think where people's minds go is if you're not supporting this political movement based on these theories, the opposite must be true. That it must be that you don't believe that racism or transphobia exists. It must be that you want harm to be done to trans people. And they're not thinking, well, maybe there's, because yes, I see that racism is a problem. Yes, I see that there are transphobes out there. But there's another way of thinking about justice and liberty for us, not just critical theory, right? There's a whole other kind of way of looking at it, and that's the part that people aren't seeing, and I think that's why it's getting so divisive and violent. Is people think it's between liberty and all-out bigotry, and I don't see it as being those two options. I just think it needs to be a dialogue about what does true justice and liberty look like, and how do we best achieve that.
And I want to dissect my Black Lives Matter comment, because I didn't do a good job of getting there yet. But but before that, I just want to kind of piggyback on what you just said. It seems that everything is just such a binary choice in politics, or just in just low level, low IQ, low frequency discourse. Like, we're not allowed to discuss any nuance. There's no there's nothing that we're allowed to do a deep dive on any. It's just for or against, red, blue. The Cowboys, Patriots, you know, to use a football term. It's just so childish. Like, I just thought people as a whole could handle. Maybe they can, and maybe it's just the propaganda and just, just the grind of the everyday person's 40 to 60-hour work week, plus kids, plus family, plus just life going on, that no one really has the time to do any deep dives on anything, or to think further beyond whatever their Twitter timeline tells them to think, or whatever the Google and Microsoft owns fact checkers tell them to think, and this has been debunked. Whatever the first article that comes out from CNN or whatever major news agency says about whatever topic, and then they'll do a automatic in a week or two, there'll be entire pieces of the article that'll be incorrect, and they'll do a retraction. But who's going to read the retraction? Who's going to go back to the same article, look all the way down to the bottom of the article, and say, oh, well, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong? No. The everyday person remembers the initial article, and they're just going to go with that. So it's like we're just in just a sphere of just consistent propaganda, and, just to put it bluntly, a lot of lies and omissions and things to push us in one direction or another. So that's just generally upsetting to me, and it's just so there's that. I wanted to piggyback on that last point you made, but just about the whole Black Lives Matter movement. I mean, just obviously, Black Lives Matter. Let's keep it first grade here, second grade. Let's keep it primary school here. Black Lives Matter. They matter a lot. They're really good people. We love Black people. Black people are awesome. I'm Black. My mom's Black. My grandma's Black. A lot of friends that are Black. There are a lot of people that are Black. 13% of the U.S. population is Black. Overwhelming percentage of the world population. I don't know what the numbers are if you count, majority of people in Africa. I mean, and also whatever you want to call it, Black. That goes back to the whole thing of categorization. It's all colorism. We determine what is Middle Eastern versus Black. And there are Black people in New Zealand, in Australia. There's the pygmies and the other indigenous people of those lands. There are Black people in Far East Asia, also indigenous people that are of blacker skin. Parts of Sub-Saharan Africa, parts of Brazil, South America, the United States, of course, and Canada. There are people who have a similar shade to me all over the world. So the whole idea of what is Black, what is Blackness, and then you coming, just talking from an immigration perspective of who is Black, as far as who is first, second generation, Black coming from Nigeria or Ghana or, another country, versus someone like me who is, I don't know, probably give or take 30th, 35th generation indigenous American and descendant of African slaves, mixed with most likely Irish and those who came from the Dominican Republic, which is also part of the transatlantic slave trade. So, and then you can go deeper into ancestry of, like, I don't know, whoever came through the Bering Strait, would be technically default some part Asian if we want to go back that far. So the topic of race is so, it should be so nuanced, but again, that's not another low level, low IQ. You're a black, you're a white, that's it, you know, but whatever.
Just
But
to jump in there, I wanted to, this might be
sure.
kind of going in the direction, but it's so interesting when you talk about race in that way. Obviously, it's so layered and fluid, really, obviously, quite fluid generation to generation. And yet we talk about race like it's this literal black or white issue. And then we talk about gender and sex like it's a spectrum and it's so fluid and it doesn't really mean anything. Who knows what someone, it's like, there's males and there's females. We know this, but so it's a very, sex is a very concrete black and white thing. Race, not at all. And so it's just the contradiction that we live in there in modern discourse is really quite gaslighty, if you will. But just to throw that in there.
Yes, it's what's convenient for whatever as I mentioned earlier, the Overton window.
Mm-hmm.
It's whatever is popular and acceptable at the time, that's what we're going with.
Mm-hmm.
It's not acceptable to say Negroes anymore. It's not acceptable to say Afro-American anymore. It's not acceptable to say, I don't know, there's some people who have a problem with relatively newer term I just became familiar with. Well, it's probably not newer, it's just gotten a little more popular in the black sphere of discussion. ADOS, a descendant of slaves, which even that term is, I feel like there should be just a little bit of a distinction between, okay, you're like me, 30-something generation, indigenous, Indian, and a descendant of slaves, whatever, through this transatlantic slave trade, versus someone who is a relatively recent immigrant coming from an African country who came on a plane or a boat or that kind of thing. But so our genealogy is going to be slightly different. There's going to be some overlapping. Back to colorism, our skin colors are going to be somewhat different. Our facial features are going to be a little bit different. But are we coming from the same culture? I don't think so, because U.S. Black culture, and I would encourage you both to, I'm sure if you may have been familiar with him, Thomas Sowell. He did a great video on YouTube I just saw where he talks about kind of the liberal, like basically the liberal identity of, I guess, the Democrats in the U.S. and Black culture not really being what people, I don't go too deep dive too much into it, but he basically kind of relays how the ghetto, quote unquote, ghetto Black culture that's been, pushed in movies and media for, a long time now, really is just a caricature or a redubbing of old Southern white culture, which came from old English ghetto culture. The bombastic boisterousness of, what people would describe as, oh, that's authentic Black in the U.S., and that's gone out to, all over the world. It's like that's what someone in Japan thinks Black is. Rap music and loudness and, BLM. Go back to that. Whatever BLM is at this point, that's Black. That's authentic Black. But things that I'm talking about right now, not authentic Black. Not at all. Not allowed to say these things. Big no-no zone. But back into BLM. So we just have to discuss just the obviousness of, again, Black people are awesome, cool beans, great. But we got to talk about the funding that went to BLM that afforded Patrisse Cullors a $1.4 million house or something like that. All these top BLM heads that just quit because they got enough money, they dipped out. The fact that the money got donated to Act Blue, which is basically a Democratic slush fund, just went to all these different organizations randomly. A lot of payoff, a lot of random stuff. So when last year sometime, when everyone posted all these black squares, and if you had iTunes, your iTunes got blacked out with all BLM stuff, and all these commercials were being pushed, and everyone's taking a knee, and just all, like, you literally couldn't escape the whole BLM media wave. When they did that to gaslight a whole bunch of white people to donate to this organization, just know that a majority of that money did not go to support anyone black. It did not go to an actual black organization, to, like food drives and uh, black politicians that would benefit people in those areas, that are going to bring funding to these areas, and build up, uh, bring business to these areas that are lower socioeconomic, majority black areas, and um, supporting black college funds, and just stuff that are directly impacting black people. Now, not to say that some of that money didn't go to those places, but you have to look at the list of what Act Blue was shifting its money towards. And if you look at 2020, that list, which was supposedly debunked, by the way, so who knows? Someone can debunk the debunk. I don't know. But, it was going to Bernie Sanders' campaign. It was going to all these different, it was going to Biden's campaign. It was going to all these different campaigns. It's like, why is so basically a lot of white people got drifted into and guilt tripped and gaslit into atoning for their white guilt, that, again, majority of you people did not engage in slavery, did not engage in economic policies to destroy the black community. Majority of you people were, so I'm talking to the US, the majority of US white folks. The majority of you people, going back, 4 to 5 generations, majority of you were lower socioeconomic folks, in some cases making less money than the average black person. Majority of you folks, may have had ancestry that came through Ellis Island. So you came through, late 1800s, early 1900s. You had no part in slavery. You might have been Irish, and the Irish have a harsh history of just being raped and pillaged over the last 1,000, 1,500 years. And, there are literal books and studies that were done for Irish people to determine, are the Irish human? Like, that's the extent of, like, the ethnic genocide and, just disparaging of the Irish people. Just an example of quote unquote white people that always had it good and are, are taking from the victimized and lower on the victimization scale black people. This is an example of a group of white people that have been totally fucked over for a millennia and continue to be. They've had their own civil wars in the UK and the Crown specifically, dealing with the whole aspect of Northern Ireland and Ireland at large and all that other stuff. I'm not super well versed on that, but I know enough to know there are groups of white people that have had some fucked up shit happen to them, just as fucked up shit has happened to black people. Just like, and just to do a slight deep dive into just transatlantic slave trade, majority of that didn't occur through white conquest or, raping and pillaging and bringing, violence towards Africa, Western Africa, more specifically, that's what kind of facilitated, that's what kind of the launch point of grabbing these groups of people and, putting them onto ships and whatnot. The majority of that was facilitated by the own internal African warring tribes who had these people already in slavery and in bondage, and sold these other tribes of people, sometimes their own people, to whites and other ethnicities and groups. People don't want to talk about the nuance of that. It's just white people did bad things they had slaves. They treated us like shit. They raped us. They did whatever to us. Then they finally gave us freedom, and and we still aren't out of bondage, so to speak, and blah 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 blah. We need to fight for more. I get it. That's like a low level boil down of U.S. descendants of slaves, and someone like me, my ancestry. You can do that low level, low IQ boil down. But at the end of the day, we need to talk about there are many other groups that have been raped and pillaged and slaughtered over the last, 2,000, 3,000 years of recorded history that we have. You can go back maybe 5,000, 10,000, of course, it's way worse, but you want to kind of center on 500 to 2,000 years. There are other areas of the world that have been really destroyed via, way harsher forms of slavery than we went through. Not to say we didn't go through anything bad, but we have to put things in perspective. And we're educating people on slavery at large, and people who came through ancestral slavery, and are speaking from a space of this victimization narrative when every commercial you see, 95% of them has someone that's black in it, and or an LGBT scope to it, or many major heads of organizations are black. We just had president that was black in the U.S. Like we can go down the list. Not to say we're out of the woods or anything like that. Legitimate racism that occurs, and financial, socioeconomic binds that hold us, like a lot of these social programs that don't benefit, that don't that basically more so benefit fatherlessness in the home, because in many cases a single black woman will get paid more through these social systems. So that's another deep dive that a lot of people don't want to discuss. And don't expect the black trans women to talk about, because it's just, again, it's all about me. I'm trans. Let's talk about being trans.
Right.
No one wants to talk about those things, and that part is not super exciting. So let me just kind of summarize the Black Lives Matter piece of this. So we've got the scope of just the financial scope of who's running this particular organization. The large BLM Inc., right? You can do a deep dive into that and find out who's doing what, but just on the basis of where the money's going and how people got drifted into sending money and are not seeing their money go to anything benefit Black people, you should have question marks. You should think. You should have questions and do your own research. I think bare minimum you should do that. But then we've got the whole just, I've heard people use this ad hominem over and over again. Well, maybe the whole BLM organization isn't good, but I support BLM because Black Lives Matter. So I'm gonna have my hashtag in my Twitter profile, and I'm gonna have BLM merch, and have my own local BLM sect. Whether or not they get money from anywhere or not or whatever, they sell T-shirts, they do whatever. Yeah, that's good and all, but what progress are you bringing towards Black people versus you just sectioning yourselves off, heightening the victimization narrative that you can't achieve this or that because of the quote-unquote patriarchy and quote-unquote whiteness. And whiteness is expanded to things that aren't white, people that aren't white. What I'm discussing is probably white. My socioeconomic level at this stage, I'm single income, single person. I may be qualified as just espousing whiteness. I go to work on time and I pay my bills, and I don't participate in any so-called nonsense. I'm not explaining that very well, but I've heard the whole whiteness encapsulates this, or non-whiteness encapsulates people being late to work or not late to work. Weird shit that I've heard. That's just so ridiculous and offensive, quite frankly. So what I just said there was a bit of sarcasm, so keep that in mind. It wasn't being serious at all. But just when people say things like that, it's just disgusting to me. But when these people are just espousing, BLM, there's BLM in Japan, there's BLM in Crimea, there's BLM in Canada and the UK, and Ireland. There's BLM all over the world. It's just become just like a thing to say that I'm in part of the whole. I can take on this as allyship to show that I'm not racist. I'm very anti-racist, which is another thing. Being anti-racist isn't enough. I just think that's so. Being proactively anti-racist, you should just engage in discourse with people who don't agree with you, and maybe they'll come out on the other side agreeing with you. Maybe they won't. Maybe they won't. But just not doing the whole proactive. Look at me. I have a BLM. It's twofold. So you've got the proactive. I've got the hashtag BLM in my profile, where I wear a T-shirt. And then, politically, you have to align with the powers that be. You need to vote Democrat, and you gotta hate Trump. You gotta hate. Can't even say his name because he's Voldemort. You have to call him 45. You have to engage in all the nuance of the placating to the power structure. Yet there's that aspect of the black BLM scope of it. Then on the other side, let's talk about the trans stuff. No disrespect to those who are, I just stopped myself to say what let me say what I was going to say and do a deep dive on it. I was going to say those who identify with being non-binary and are legitimately non-binary, which is I have to break that up because what I just said, how am I going to determine if you're legitimately non-binary or not? That's a whole different issue. But let's just say for the people who know in their heart whether or not they actually believe in this ideology of non-binary, let's distinguish them from the people who are just putting he/they or she/they in their profile, like they're putting hashtag BLM in their profile, and people who do both, because double victimization points. Look at me, I'm a super ally. It goes hand in hand. So when you get that type of disingenuousness in the discourse, and then they have the higher ground morally, supposedly, because they are so tolerant to everything, yet they are so intolerant of anything else outside the discourse, not willing to discuss anything, not willing to go into the deep dive of anything. That's where we get just a stopping point of just these are the accepted ideas and you must follow them, and thus we've got a religiosity. You've got I feel that there's a merging of the two now. And if you could take me and pull up Bizarro World Cat would be this person, would be telling you, yes, BLM is awesome. Yes, I have an oscillating gender expression, which depends on the moon. Depending on the moon rise and the sun falling and all that stuff. And my gender expression will change depending on the day and all that stuff. And I go by he, she, they pronouns and every other pronoun under the scope. And I'm fully for medicalizing children as young as 2. And I have to go with everything the mainstream zeitgeist is telling me to go with. And you must listen to me because I'm black and I'm trans and trans female specifically. So super on the politicization of the victimization scale. You must listen to me, and I have the moral high ground because of who I am and my demographics that I just gave you, my data points. So that's my problem. All of that.
Yeah. Well, thank you for all of that. I wanted to just pick up on this idea of the religious nature of it, because that's something, Aaron, you've talked about, and in both our podcast a little bit, but in other podcasts about some of those parallels and the way that it's restructuring our society in ways parallel to religion. I mean, I remember thinking that the Bible was almost unreadable, right? Because I only knew that there was the King James version, and it's a difficult read because it's not our common language. And when you have a text that says this is somehow your key to liberation, but it's not really accessible to you as an individual, and so you need a priestly class. You need a priestly class to interpret that. They have the special knowledge and wisdom to interpret that for you, so that you have access to that, to God or to freedom or whatever it is you're seeking. And there is something similar. I mean, there's lots of parallels to be drawn, but there is something similar in. I haven't really read critical race theory, so I'll stick to queer theory because that's what I know. It's a difficult read. I mean, reading Judith Butler, if you handed out Judith Butler books on the street, most people would look at it. It's like, this is a foreign language. I don't understand this. So we need this priestly class to interpret that for us, that this special knowledge that is somehow the key to your liberation. We need these priests who have this special knowledge to translate for us. Otherwise, we're just lost, right? And can never achieve freedom. So that's a parallel I'm seeing, is that we have these people that are. I don't think it's a coincidence that queer theory is written in this language that is so inaccessible to the average person, right? It's a language of the elite, that only certain people can decipher, or even have the time or the energy or the interest in deciphering it.
It's interesting what you're saying there, and what Kat was saying at the beginning, how we need a reformation. It's like quite literally that was the case, is that the Bible was only printed in Latin. So so Martin Luther came forward and was like, well, hey, we all speak German, so if we just publish this shit in German, people can decide for themselves what they believe. And it's kind of like, so not to be all lofty and Superman of us all, but like, I feel like that's kind of what we're doing, is like, we're taking like the trans discourse and being like, look, this is not a mystery. This is not complicated. This is just, here's what's going on. Here's what this is. So yeah, it's quite reformist in that, that regard.
But it's been so dumbed down too. I mean, there's some value in queer theory. I thought there were some ideas in it that were valuable, but it's just so inaccessible. And so that we've tried to kind of dumb it down, by turning it into popular culture at the expense of really understanding it. And I get a sense that's what you're saying about the Black Lives Matter critical race theory too, is that people don't necessarily understand it, the nuances of it. Not everyone is an academic. So it's been translated to us in these very simplistic terms in popular culture. And we just sort of trust that these experts and these academics, they know what they're talking about. So we're not going to think too hard about it. We're not going to do a deep dive into it and really understand the nuances. So, I mean, I do, I think, understand queer theory enough to engage in some critical debate about it. And it's an academic discipline. We're supposed to debate about it. We're supposed to think about it. It's supposed to be an ongoing conversation. But when we try to do that, we're by the people that don't really understand it. They just sort of understand the YouTube version of it. They're the ones calling me a bigot as if I don't understand it.
Yeah, that's where we're at, and it's incredibly frustrating. I'm sure for both of you and for many of us who get it. I don't want to sound holier than thou and say I get it. YouTube get it, and the other people don't get it, because that's kind of the other end of what we're saying. That a lot of these ideologues are saying is, oh no, you don't get what we're saying. We get it. You don't get it. So we're both doing this. We're both doing the Spider-Man finger point at each other, and we're not having a discourse. And that's really the problem. Discourse. No one wants to talk.
Yeah.
No one wants to talk through anything. It's a lot easier to do a 5-minute YouTube boil down of things and regurgitate things. It's a lot easier to do a CNN talking head, a moderator, and two people just talk over each other for 10 minutes, and okay, well, that's all the information I need for the day, kind of thing. And that goes for everything, all over the world for any topic. That's where we're at.
Because it's not that the average person is too dumb to get it. It's that it's designed in such a way that you're not supposed to get it.
Yeah.
Right? So that people who say that they get it are able to have power and control everyone else.
Exactly. It's almost like this. It's quite literally this forbidden. It's this forbidden text. It's just like, well, to go back to my original point about a Reformation, relating back to two of the three major Abrahamic religions, Christianity and Islam. You've got Christianity, which has had a Reformation, and the everyday Christian, doesn't necessarily follow everything to the letter in the text, and the texts have been manipulated, and there are different versions of such, and you've got the Dead Sea Scrolls and all sorts of other stuff. And you want to go into, Judaism, you've got the not Kabbalah, I forget the exact
Torah
book. Not the Torah, the main text, but there's another text that's supposedly more sacred and has more. Trying to think of it. I'll find it. I'll think of it later. But there's another deeper text that just really isn't discussed in popular culture. But those who know what I'm talking about. That are deeper into the religion, or just super into religion in general. The study of such. But we've got Islam, and I have many friends that are Muslim, close friends, dear friends, that follow Islam, not necessarily to the letter, but they have the idea that their book is whatever the term is, it's impenetrable. There's no, we cannot reform this because Muhammad's words are infallible, and these were his words, and the disciples, his disciples, I forget the exact name they went by, not Jesus' disciples, but Muhammad's followers later on, as they put the book together, most of them are of the opinion that you cannot alter this at all. Like this is it. So if you have a Reformation, that's going to be it's going to be a slight towards Allah.
A bastardization of the faith.
Yes. So that's kind of where we're at, I feel, with the trans discourse, especially. Even though, as silly as it is, things change all the time. Things just keep changing. Go back 5 years, go back 15 years, go back 55 years of what transgenderism is and what's acceptable and what's okay, what's not okay. And if you told someone 55 years ago that, oh, okay, I've got my 4 or 5 year olds who's not really adjusting very well to school and very quiet, and they, let's just say a boy, let's medicalize them and put them on puberty blockers and things of that nature to feminize them further and affirm their new gender identity at 4, 5, 6 years old. If you said that 50, 55 years ago in the United States of America or Canada, I'm pretty sure there'd be a major backlash. But we're at the point now where it's just, so no one cares. It's not a big deal. It's just accepted. And
well, doing so is a demonstration of the faith.
Bingo.
It's a moral declaration, like an extreme. It's kind of Abraham and Isaac almost. It's like you truly believe in God so much, or in the trans faith so much, you're sacrificing your own child to it. I mean, sorry to use that dark terminology, but there's parallels
as horrible
again.
As this to say, and I don't want to get too deep into the occult. A lot of other things that I have opinions on, but it is, and no matter what you believe spiritually or whatever your religious beliefs are, or even political, there's something to the idea of the mythical and the old world belief of sacrificing your firstborn, so to speak, to the gods, or all these different stories that have come up in different cultures all over the world with a similar ethos of I'm giving up my child to this entity, to this organization, to
there's no greater demonstration than that, right? There's no greater
devoutness.
Than sacrificing your child to it. It's probably why it's such a universal trope.
And it's going to sound silly to some, but on the head, literally for others. What is a christening, or a christening for girls, or a circumcision for boys? What is that? That literally is, whether or not you believe in the tenets of it medically, that it should or shouldn't happen, that's on you. But just the act of, here is my child, do this, and now they're accepted into this religion wholeheartedly, and now our God will protect them, and so on and so forth. It's very much in the same faith of, I've got my 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old boy or girl here. Medical entities, big pharma, a lot of people that are bought and paid for, that have financial interest in doing things to your child. Here is my child. You tell me the right way to go about this, because the alternative is, if I don't do this, my child is going to kill themselves or be unhappy, or I'm going to be, me as a parent, I'm going to be a statistic because I let my child maybe die or be upset about things for X amount of time, or I'm intolerant because I didn't let them go this route. I'm intolerant. I want to show my absolute tolerance, my absolute acceptance of everything, that I will give my child up to these medical, social entities, regardless of its merits of being okay or not okay, or acceptable, not acceptable. But let's step outside the scope of that, because we can talk about that all day. But just the idea of that process is very similar to a circumcision, a christening, the female genital mutilation that happens in Islamic cultures and other cultures also. And you can go deep into other genital alterations that are done in like African cultures and things like that. The penis is extended, or all sorts of things, and you can go deep down the rabbit hole of that, but just you can make your own assumptions, or make your own conclusions based off of what I said there. But it just very much is the same thing, the same action. Well, you can debate the merits of it on your own, but just want to bring that out there. Not sure what my point was, but I just wanted to harp on.
Just again with those religious parallels.
Yeah. Okay, so that's where we're going. So yeah, so religious. So let's talk about this. So this is going to be weird to say, but I almost feel that to be trans in this day and age in the Western world is it's another thing of the acceptable list, the things that you have to accept in order to be trans, and if you're not trans kind of thing, which aligns to, if you're not doing XYZ, you're not Black, or you're not Hispanic, or you're not Far East Asian, Korean, Japanese, whatever subset you want to go into. But we're trans, so let's talk about being trans. The idea of having some type of spirituality, or believing in God, or some type of God, outside of being an atheist, or somehow just being an outright occultist, and or Satanist or anything like that. I almost feel like that's like the prevailing ethos of transness right now. It's like if you spoke to the everyday trans person, they would either be atheist, or lie about their atheism in public, and they're occultists or Satanists or whatever they are, whatever you want to believe, it's fine. But another aspect of why can't other voices be heard in the discourse? Why can't there be other ways to go about this thing? Why is there this uniform trans police that goes around and says, oh, that idea that you espouse is wrong and hateful, and you need to turn around and collect $100 to go back around the monopoly. You're wrong. You're out of pocket, so to speak. I don't want to dip into that, but I don't know either of your religious beliefs or if you have them or whatever the case
I'm
may
the token atheist trans.
There you go. So, but my thing is just opening up to other perspectives of the afterlife and spirituality, and injecting a bit of God into your trans experience. I just feel like that's another thing that's kind of shitted on. Not that I'm like a devout Christian or devout Judaist, Islamist, or anything like that. Me personally, I just believe that there's energy, and there's energy all around us. God is energy. There are dimensions that, oscillate in between, and hopefully when we die, we go in between them, and there are lower entities of a lower frequency. There are higher entities of a higher frequency. Go in between these spaces, and it's not necessarily going to space, so to speak, more so realms that we enter, or we go in and out of in a dream state or in a DMT state, or just specifically just in a meditative state. I almost feel like that's left out of pop trans culture because it's just more convenient to just go with the atheism route, or the now it's becoming more public, more occultist route.
Yeah, faith of any kind. Yeah, I agree with you. Faith of any kind is seen as incompatible, with transness or even queerness. But it's such a contradiction, because if transness, or what I prefer to just call the experience of gender dysphoria, if that is somehow innate, and I don't necessarily think that it is, but let's say it was. Let's say there's something wired into our brains that makes us dysphoric. That should exist across the political spectrum, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just like having diabetes would exist across the political spectrum. Like, what would that have to do with my culture or my belief system, or which political party I vote for, if it's just something that's innate to my being, like diabetes would be, or
exactly. But I just think it's part of the policing of what is, again, the Overton window, what is acceptable within that, you being trans, becoming trans. You have to have these, the parroted same set of beliefs generally across the board, or else you will be, excommunicated. And just another thing that I just kind of grinds my gears about just trans. So to me, transitioning, what you can debate the merits of it, what the right age is, whether or not it's a legitimate idea to do so. And you can debate trans women entering women's spaces, trans men entering men's spaces, and the whole non-binary sphere, and you can debate all aspects of it. But to me, transgenderism or transness, I think the main tenet of it was, or I thought it was, bodily autonomy. You have control over your body. So whether or not you make the right decision or the wrong decision, whatever the case is, that's between you and your body. Whatever decisions you make going forward, right? And I just feel like the trans community is very much in a policing state in terms of whatever the mainstream media is telling them to do, as far either injecting something into their body or not injecting something into their body. And we don't have to do a deep dive on that. I just want to mention that oxymoron, or that inconsistency, so to speak, in where we're at in the discourse, where the everyday trans person, generally speaking, is very deep into whatever the mainstream media consensus is. Any, we can talk about some of the doctors who have spoke out a little bit recently. Again, early medicalization, or just in general, just some of these outright butcher jobs of top surgeries and bottom surgeries and things like that. Youth and just the people in general just going through things very early in detransitioners that are not allowed to speak. They're kind of othered as well, and thankfully they're a lot more of them are coming out, and I'm very happy that they're doing so, because a lot of that should be out there, out in the open. So I don't want to necessarily go too deep there. You can kind of guess what I'm alluding to, but I just want to make that important distinction of how there's so many things in the pop psychology transness that is just like, you say this, but why is this inconsistent? I just want consistency across the board. That's what I'm looking for, but
sure,
clearly we're not getting that.
Well, it seems to at the heart of it seems to define freedom and liberty of the person as having no boundaries. That there should be no limit to which spaces that I should be entitled to enter. There should be no limit on what I can do to my own body. There should be no limit in terms of how I conceptualize my own gender. So it seems to be building into this concept that I'm not going to be free as a person unless I can do whatever I want. And somehow the world should just respond to that and give me what I want without any barriers. And we see this in the whole debate about hormone readiness assessment and gatekeeping, right? That there should be absolutely no barrier between me and the thing that I want, because that is an infringement on my freedom and liberty. But we're not understanding that there's healthiness in boundaries, that especially personal boundaries, that healthy relationship depends on there being healthy personal boundaries, and that there is freedom in that and in our collective responsibilities to one another in relationship, right? And that somehow is getting lost. And we understood that when we talked about freedom as being about character, that if I'm a good person and if I work hard and I've got the values and I contribute to society, that there's a freedom in that because I have responsibility to others, not just what I can take from others. And I feel like that's what's been eroded is understanding this relationship, the healthy relationships with ourselves and others involves boundaries. And I feel like the queer culture for a long time has been all about eroding personal boundaries. Because to have any personal boundaries is to say, well, I agree with that behavior, but I don't really agree with that behavior, or so that we want to erode all those boundaries where, to the point where to have any kind of boundary is seen as oppressive.
And just to go back to what I was saying, that seems like everything is a binary choice now. In this space, it's either full-on boundaries or no boundaries. And society needs boundaries. It's the only thing that keeps society afloat, especially Western society. Like, without our boundaries and certain degree of laws and just common law, not even necessarily things that are in stone, so to speak, or in writing, in legislation. Common law, just things that we all know and hold to be true, self-evident. Just respect for one another, respect for physical boundaries, just helping one another, just things that should be a major tenets of society as a whole. You're kind of saying what I've been thinking for a long time. It's like, I never wanted to go to, like, as a as a cis person, I never wanted to go to a gay parade or anything like that. I never wanted to do that. A pride parade. I never wanted to. It was just like majority of them were just dildo swinging and harnesses and chaps and stuff like that. It's like, okay, it's clear to me that the idea here is full liberation of all boundaries, all sense, because anything else that was restrictive was just too much for you. And this must be an expose of, hey, look, we can do this out in the open now. All of our sexual proclivities can be out. And this is it. This is where we're at. And I never felt comfortable with that. I never identified with that. I never identified with that at all. Me personally. And just that idea of, I think we're heading down a dangerous road of just everything is open for everyone, for everything at any time. As we open the doors to different gender choices and people who change their gender on different time scales or different days, and what defines gender, and people who aren't medicalizing themselves but will change their gender expression or change their gender documentation, but yet change nothing about themselves. Physically, so to speak, and that's another debate. But I just feel like the rules of society, Western society, are starting to break down, and like I mentioned the first time that we all kind of discussed here, we're talking. I almost feel that we are going to be the scapegoats for what comes next. It's every, and I guess we're like the normie trans people. We're just kind of silly. I don't want to divest myself from the trans community completely, or just say I'm better than or elevate myself as such, but we're almost like the normies. We want to assimilate as much as possible. Generally speaking, we have different ideas on what to do medically or surgically or whatever about our lives, and we have different ideas of who we want to be with romantically, partnership wise, and things like that. But just generally speaking, most of our, I would say most of us on our side of like the GDA kind of things, or the GC, gender critical folks all around the world, kind of, we just want to be left alone. We just kind of want to seep into society and just kind of be normal people. Generally speaking, we don't want to raise a lot of noise. We don't want to talk a lot. We just want to kind of keep our dysphoria down as much as possible and try to get through the rest of our lives as relatively normal people, knowing that we're not quote unquote normal. There's obviously something different about us. We can only pass but so much if no matter what we do surgically or plastic surgery wise or whatever we do, there's nothing that's going to change our chromosomal makeup. At the end of the day, that's it. We got what we got when we came out of the womb or cesarean section, whatever happened. You came out of the lab. However you came out of, we are what we are, right? I say that jokingly, but we're like, we're pretty much already doing the lab stuff, which is interesting. But it's, I don't know.
I think what you're saying is that there's almost like a virtue in nihilism that's taken over societally, where it's kind of like anarchy and nihilism is the virtuous position to take. It seems, with how a lot of people approach their behavior and the behaviors of others. Very no holds barred, and nothing means anything. And as somebody who kind of identified as an atheist and what I would call a happy nihilist for a long time, it's like I really see that there is a lot of societal good in having, boundaries and religions that kind of keep people tied to each other and in a symbiotic give and take of responsibilities and so when we break those down, now I'm starting to realize, there is a lot of value in the traditional religions and just for what they provide us societally, and in the absence of those, we create them, but we seem to do a really piss poor job at putting things in those places, now we've got this the kind of critical race theory stuff, the queer theory, things that kind of attempt to give us this other meaning beyond ourselves and this group association, but it's really bleak and nihilistic and narcissistic and has a lot of the trappings of the ancient religions, but none of the positives of forgiveness and responsibility and empathy and redemption. A lot of these new kind of religions seek to punish people in the real life, doxing or cancellation, whatever. It's like these, no longer is that the realm of God to punish, your misgivings, your missteps. It's in the Twitter mob is now, they get to demonstrate their religious purity and piety by busting out the pitchforks and making sure to silence, cancel, whatever. So human beings, we keep doing this stuff. I just think we've got it really, really wrong right now.
Yeah.
So like I'm not like a devout Bible reader or believe everything to the tenet or anything like that. Or I take these religious texts as kind of a template of, they're allegories. There's metaphors in there, and things that I think people should kind of read or review, from time to time. But I'm not a religious zealot in the way that a lot of people say right now. This time is the beginning of Revelation, so to speak, which is, I don't have a lot to combat or to disagree with. We're just,
the signs are kind of there.
There's too many things that are going on that are just like, how can Western society keep up with? And then we're just talking about the gender aspect of things, but economic, socio-political, we can go deeper into the wormhole of that. That's a different podcast. Maybe I should start one. I don't know, but we're just dealing with a lot of people who just want all hell to break loose on the trans, people who are trans, people who aren't trans, who revel in the confusion because it benefits their pocketbook. And want more children that are medicalized, more money in their pocket, and the more rainbow T-shirts you can sell in Target that are kid size and baby size, and the more little kids books that you can wear, kids books that you can buy of, oh, my tolerant baby, my anti-racist baby, these little books that come out. It's just all, everything's a grift. Everything's a grift.
We'll have to have you. Yeah, we'll have to have you back, Kat. I feel like you might be a regular feature. Because I do feel like we could talk for hours. So we'll have you back.
Awesome.
But I really appreciate that you came on and we could get to know you a little bit better and just hear your perspective and the depth of your knowledge about these things. So thanks so much for agreeing to come and chat with us.
Thank you. I just want to say at the very tail end of this, if anyone has listened to everything that I've said, I just want to preface everything that I've said with, I just want peace in the world. I want discourse. I want some type of societal order. I feel that trans people should not be the majority of people, because transitioning should be it just shouldn't be a natural order of things. We should be accepted and allowed to proceed in life and not be hanged or killed for being trans or deciding to do such. But there should be parameters around such, and we ourselves are not exalted people. We are fallible people. The LGBT community, we're all fallible people. I just want people to talk about each other, have discussions, make jokes like Dave Chappelle. Watch the Dave Chappelle special. It was great. I just want everyone to just have some fun again and just get their heads out their ass. Out of their ass. That's really what I want in life, in this world, but I may not get it before I go. but I don't. But
It's a good aspiration.
Just if anyone's trying to like dox me and end my life or stab me or whatever and think I'm like anti-BLM or anti-whoever, just want to say I love you all. Everyone means well, I'm sure. I just want everyone to step outside of their mindset and their organizations and their tribes and think about who's controlling what and where the money's going, and just try to have individual thought. Individual thought is my primary ethos. That was my theme for the world, and this podcast is individual thought and less ego-driven, tribalistic thought.
Great message for the day.
That's where I'm at.
Yep. Excellent.
Thanks so much, Kat.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Transparency Podcast. If you enjoy our content, please help out our algorithm by hitting like or subscribe. If you'd like to make a donation, follow the link to our PayPal account. On behalf of the Gender Dysphoria Alliance, thanks for your support.